The most powerful empire on Earth vanished in less than a decade. Cities were abandoned, fertile farmland turned into desert, and millions watched their world collapse around them. All that remained was dust, ruins, and a mystery buried for more than 4,000 years. But the most frightening part was not how fast it happened. It was the fact that no great army destroyed the empire. So what was powerful enough to erase the first superpower in human history? And why couldn't a civilization that believed itself invincible survive? This is the story of the fall of the Akkadian Empire. A vast golden sun rises over the sprawling, perfectly ordered ziggurats of Akkad, bustling with commerce and power. Suddenly, the image glitches and dissolves into a terrifying, sepia-toned wasteland of shifting dunes, broken stone, and a single, wind-blown banner of Sargon the Great falling into the dust. Imagine a civilization that touched the stars, a golden age of absolute dominance that simply blinked out of existence. In less than a decade, the first true empire in human history, the mighty Akkadian Empire, vanished, leaving behind nothing but scorched records and the haunting silence of a dead landscape. We are looking at a history that was not just lost, but erased. This is not a story of a slow decline, but a forensic investigation into a sudden, violent disappearance. Before we peel back the layers of this ancient enigma, consider how quickly the foundation of your own world might shift if the sky itself turned against you. To understand the end, we must first look at the sheer, terrifying scale of what existed. Established by Sargon the Great, the Akkadian Empire was an anomaly of the ancient world. It was a sprawling network of cities, interconnected through a sophisticated bureaucracy, a brutal standing army, and a technological mastery of irrigation that turned the arid plains of Mesopotamia into a verdant, overflowing garden. Imagine the sheer audacity of these architects, building monuments of baked clay and gold that were designed to last an eternity. For generations, they believed they were invincible. But beneath the surface of this golden age, the empire was held together by a fragile, invisible thread. That thread was the water supply. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were the lifeblood of every citizen, every soldier, and every merchant. The empire thrived on a delicate balance of agricultural surplus, and at its peak, the wealth was staggering. But history is rarely kind to those who believe they have mastered nature. The evidence of the collapse began to mount in the soil, hidden from the eyes of the kings who sat upon their thrones. We look now at the geological record, the silent witness to the end. Deep beneath the surface of modern-day Syria, ancient sediment cores tell a story that no history book recorded. Starting around 2200 BCE, a shift occurred. It was not a war, at least not initially. It was a climate event of such intensity that it defied the resilience of the most advanced civilization of the time. We see layers of wind-blown dust suddenly overwhelming the fertile silt. This is our first major clue in the forensic timeline. A massive, region-wide drought began to turn the fields of Akkad into salt-crusted deserts. The irrigation systems, once the pride of the empire, failed due to the drought. The social fabric did not disintegrate in a day, but the pressure was compounding. Think of a civilization that relies on a constant, surplus-driven economy. When that surplus vanishes, the center cannot hold. We see evidence of mass migration. The northern populations, desperate for food and water, began to move southward, pressing against the borders of the central power. This was not a barbarian invasion in the traditional sense. It was a human tide, a desperate surge of people driven by the primal need for survival. The central archives mention the Guchians, a group characterized by the Akkadians as mountain-dwelling savages. They are often blamed for the fall, yet archaeology suggests that they were merely scavengers, opportunistic groups who moved into a power vacuum that had already been created by famine and internal chaos. The internal records of the later Akkadian kings, like Naram-Sin, speak of defiance, but the reality was far more pathetic. The state, unable to provide grain or security, lost its mandate. As the cities began to starve, the palace guards deserted their posts. The taxes stopped flowing. The grand, centralized administration that had governed life from the coast to the mountains simply vaporized. The mystery here is not how they were defeated, but how they were so completely incapable of adapting. Why did the empire, with its immense resources, fail to weather the storm? The answer lies in their rigidity. They had built a system so centralized, so top-heavy, that it possessed zero elasticity. When the environment shifted, the state had no way to pivot. It was, in essence, a brittle machine. By the time the final king, Shar-Kali-Shari, faced the collapse, the Akkadian heartland was already a hollow shell. The archaeological strata from this period show a complete lack of luxury goods, a marked decrease in trade, and the abandonment of urban centers in favor of nomadic, subsistence-level life. It is as if the entire population collectively decided that the empire was no longer worth the effort of maintaining. This is the hallmark of a system-wide failure. The psychological impact of such a collapse is hard to overstate. For a populace that had viewed their emperors as semi-divine, the sight of their fields turning to dust and their cities to ruins must have been apocalyptic. We must consider the possibility that the Akkadian collapse was a feedback loop. Climate change triggered the famine, which caused migration, which led to civil unrest, which crippled the administration, which rendered the irrigation systems impossible to repair, which led to further famine. It was a perfect storm of environmental disaster and political obsolescence. The Gushans, the supposed invaders, were just the final tremor that brought down the roof of a house already rotting from within. We see no signs of massive, citywide burning or mass graves that would indicate a singular final battle. Instead, we see a slow, creeping abandonment. The empire did not die in a glorious blaze of combat. It died of neglect. It starved in the dark. Is this a cautionary tale or a simple historical footnote? We look at our own world with our hyper-integrated economies and our absolute reliance on complex global supply chains, and we realize that the Akkadians were not so different from us. They too believed they had reached the end of history, that their systems were the final, perfect iteration of civilization. Yet, a few years of harsh weather and broken social contracts were enough to consign their entire existence to the dust of history. The Akkadian Empire serves as an uncomfortable mirror. It reminds us that complexity is not the same as stability. In fact, complexity is often a tax on survival. When we search for the Akkadians today, we find only fragments. A broken statue here, a discarded cuneiform tablet there. Their language, their laws, and their names are shadowed, whispers carried by the wind across the Mesopotamian plains. The lesson they left behind is as sharp as a blade. No matter how high you build, no matter how much you control, the earth belongs to neither the king nor the peasant. It belongs only to the cycle. And when that cycle turns against you, the empire that took centuries to build can be erased in a single decade. The evidence is clear, the trajectory unavoidable, and the result is the same for every civilization that assumes it is the exception to the rule. If you found this descent into the wreckage of history as compelling as the facts suggest, you know that the past is never truly gone. It is merely silent, waiting for us to listen. We explore these forgotten chapters of human experience to better navigate the currents of our own time. Stay curious. Look beyond the surface of what is remembered and continue to peel back the layers of the world we inhabit. There are more mysteries buried beneath the sand, and we will be here to exhume them. Subscribe to Fact Harbor and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss our next investigation into the shadows of the past. The history that shaped us is just one discovery away. But what happens when the dust settles and the memory of a civilization fades into the ether of myth? We often talk about the collapse of empires as if they are sudden, cinematic catastrophes, but history rarely moves with the speed of a Hollywood blockbuster. The Akkadian decline was not a singular event, but a long, agonizing erosion of trust. When the rains failed and the harvests withered, the central authority did not just lose its resources, it lost its legitimacy. The gods, who were supposedly tethered to the king's proximity, seemed to have turned their backs. This transition from a divine order to a desperate, fractured survival is where the true human tragedy resides. It is in the desperate scratching of a scribe on a clay tablet, recording the price of grain as it rose beyond the reach of the common citizen, that we see the real end of an empire. Consider for a moment the fragility of our own interconnected systems. We rely on global supply chains that span oceans, digital infrastructure that exists in the vacuum of cloud memory, and a socio-political consensus that feels solid only until it is tested by a prolonged crisis. The Akkadians had their own version of this, their own complex web of trade routes and bureaucratic mandates that allowed them to project power far beyond the reaches of their heartland. Yet, that very interconnectedness became the primary vector for their dissolution. When the periphery began to starve, the center could not hold, and the shockwaves of localized failure rippled outward until every pillar of the state came crashing down. It is a terrifying realization that the more sophisticated a system becomes, the more points of failure it inherently possesses. We look back at the Akkadians with a sense of distance, treating their plight as a curiosity of the distant past. We assume that our technology, our scientific understanding, and our global awareness grant us a level of immunity that the ancients lacked. But is that confidence warranted? Or is it simply the same arrogance that every fading power has felt since the dawn of urban life? We are currently living through an era of unprecedented data collection, where we can track the health of our climate and the stability of our societies with terrifying precision. And yet, we see the same patterns emerging: the widening gap between the elite and the populace, the degradation of vital resources, and the gnawing anxiety that the systems we rely upon are increasingly brittle. History is not a straight line of progress. It is a pendulum that swings across a wide arc of human capacity. Sometimes we move toward enlightenment and growth, but gravity always exerts its pull, dragging us back toward the simplicity of the struggle for basic sustenance. The Akkadian experience teaches us that civilization is a fragile experiment, one that requires constant nourishment and a shared commitment to the common good. When that commitment is replaced by the pursuit of narrow, self-serving objectives, the foundation begins to crack. The cracks might go unnoticed for years, hidden beneath the veneer of prosperity, but they are there, patiently waiting for the weight of reality to force them open. As we move forward into an uncertain future, we would be wise to heed the whispers of the Akkadian scribes. They were not merely recording the rise and fall of kings. They were documenting the physical and spiritual costs of maintaining a grand vision. We must ask ourselves what we are building, and more importantly, why. Are we constructing monuments to our own immortality, or are we creating structures that can withstand the inevitable cycles of change? The answers lie not in the stars or in the grand proclamations of current leaders, but in the choices we make today regarding our resources, our empathy for one another, and our ability to adapt before the drought arrives. The ruins of Akkad remain a silent testament to our potential and our limitations. They remind us that while we are capable of reaching the heavens, we are just as capable of returning to the dirt. The mission of our investigation here at Fact Harbor is not to spread fear, but to foster a healthy, grounded awareness. By studying the mistakes of those who came before, we arm ourselves with the wisdom necessary to be the exception to the rule. We are the architects of the next chapter, and the ink is still wet. Whether this era becomes another cautionary tale buried beneath the sand or a bridge to something more sustainable is entirely up to us. Thank you for walking through the dust of history with us today. Your journey into the heart of the past ensures that these forgotten voices are never truly silenced. Stay vigilant, keep questioning, and never assume that the light will burn forever without tending the flame.